Hi, I'm Julia Hess, the Collection Services and Metadata Librarian here at Copley Library. In this video, I'll tell you a little bit about metadata, give you some tips about making the most of our library's catalog, and end with a look at the future of information organization and retrieval. First, let's talk about what metadata is and why you should care. The shortest and most common definition of metadata is that it's data about data. While that's a little oversimplified, it does get to the point. Metadata tells you about a resource. You probably look at metadata all the time without thinking about it. For example, here is some metadata about a digital picture. You can see the name of the picture, the type of file, its location and size, and some dates and times associated with it. All of this is metadata. In libraries, we create metadata all the time. This is what catalog records are. Metadata about books, videos, and other resources we provide access to. We create these records to help with two types of searching, what we call known item searches and unknown item searches. Known item searches are when the user is looking for something specific. Maybe a professor has given you a list of books to look at, or you want to watch a movie with your friends. Once you've searched the catalog and found a promising record, we try to help you decide whether what you found is what you're looking for by describing the resource as accurately as possible in the record. That way, if the record you're looking at is for the wrong item, you can tell right away without having to go find the actual thing first. Here are some actual records from our catalog. Look at them and see if you can identify some types of metadata they all include. Even though those records were all for different types of items, a book, a DVD, and an e-book, you might have noticed they all had a few things in common, such as listing the title, some publication information, and some sort of physical description, although the actual information provided varies. The book's record, for example, tells you how many pages it is, while the DVD's tells you how long the movie is. Some records also include things like a summary, a table of contents, and maybe even a picture of the cover. All of this metadata is provided to help you decide if the item is what you're looking for, so you don't waste time going to the shelves for a book or DVD that isn't what you wanted. Unknown item searches are a little more complicated. This is when you sort of know what you're looking for. Maybe you have a question you need to have answered, or you need to do research on a particular topic, but you don't have a specific resource in mind. To help you find useful materials in these situations, we create metadata to describe the content of items. This can be difficult. In many cases, describing what a book or journal issue is about can be complicated and subjective. But the main way this is different from describing the physical aspects of an item is where we get the wording we use. Information like the book's title and publication information are entered exactly like they are on the book, including misspellings and typos. That way, when you look at the catalog record, you have the best possible chance of deciding whether or not it is describing the item you want. But for metadata useful in unknown item searches, like subjects and authors, we use controlled vocabularies. Okay, so what are controlled vocabularies? A controlled vocabulary is a list of words, phrases, names, etc. that tell us exactly what terms we are allowed to use. If I am cataloging a book about World War II, for example, before I list that as the subject, I have to check a list to make sure that's the proper way to phrase it. Here is an example of the main controlled vocabulary we use to talk about subjects. Don't worry about understanding everything you see here. The important part to notice is that under World War II, it says to use World War 1939 to 1945 instead. So if I did use World War II, I'd be wrong. While this seems a little nitpicky, it actually serves a valuable purpose. Let's look at how you can take advantage of this when you're looking for resources in a library catalog. Say you want to find information about the American Civil War. You go to your favorite search engine and type in Civil War. Will you get a lot of results? Of course. All of your results will include the phrase Civil War somewhere. But the real question is, will you get the best results? Unfortunately, you won't get any results that refer solely to the War between the States, or the War of Secession, or the War of the Rebellion, even though such resources may provide valuable information and an entirely different perspective. Furthermore, your result list probably includes thousands of completely irrelevant links to resources that merely mention the Civil War in passing, or even focus on an entirely different civil war in another country. While keyword searching is certainly easy, it is far from the best way to do serious research. We use controlled vocabularies to help fix that problem, helping you find all of the resources we have on a specific topic and to weed out irrelevant results. Let's try typing Civil War into our catalog. It turns out we get a lot of results, more than 7,500. We have a few different options of how to proceed from here. We could weed through this result list, looking for relevant resources. We could try a more specific keyword search, such as American Civil War. While this certainly narrows down the result list, it also accidentally weeds out plenty of relevant resources. Finally, we could look for controlled subject terms in a record. Let's open a record and see what we can find. When we go to the subjects, we find one that looks promising, United States History Civil War. When we click on that, we actually perform a new search using those exact terms. Notice now we have less than 3,500 results, less than half of what we had before. And we know they will all be relevant to our topic. They will all be about the American Civil War, and they should include all of the books, ebooks, DVDs, and print serials Copley has that are relevant to our topic. If you want something more specific, you can try looking for more specific subject headings. For example, if I'm interested in naval operations during the Civil War, I could click on this one. Now I have a much more manageable set of records to look at. A more powerful option for searching based on subjects is available through the Advanced Search option. You can find the link to the Advanced Search under the main catalog search box on the library's homepage. Once there, you can see the list of indexes across the top. This allows you to browse the catalog based on a specific type of metadata. Let's try our Civil War search here. Because I'm looking for information about the Civil War, I'll click on Subject. Since I know there have been many civil wars, I'll type in American Civil War. Thanks to behind-the-scenes metadata, the system knows to suggest the correct term, the one we saw in records earlier. Once I click on it, I am presented with a list that gives me a couple of different options. If I want general information about the Civil War, I can see how many items the library owns that fit my topic. If I'm interested in narrowing down my search, however, I can look at the various subtopics under the Civil War. If I click on any of these links, I'll get a list of all the items the library owns that have been assigned that subject. The advantage of this technique is that I don't have to know the standard term used in the catalog. I can take a guess, and the catalog will help me find the correct term. Once I have a list like this, I can use it to narrow down my topic, and maybe find an aspect of it I hadn't thought of looking into. We also have a controlled vocabulary list for names. Let's say you want to find everything the library owns by Mark Twain. You could try a quick keyword search of the catalog, but you will have to narrow things down quite a bit to make sure everything you find has the correct Mark Twain as the author, and not as the subject. For this kind of task, the Advanced Search's Browse option is much more efficient and accurate. Let's try it. In Advanced Search, I'll select Author as the index and try Twain Mark in the search box. Notice I put his last name first. That's important for this kind of search. I get two results. One is an entry that gives me the proper name for Mark Twain, and the other is what we call a See Also reference. This lets us know that Mark Twain isn't the author's only name, and works that were published under another name will be listed under that name. So we can click on the correct form of Mark Twain's name to get a list of everything he wrote that we have access to. But we can also try his other name to make sure we have a complete list. This method is particularly useful if you are searching for an author with a common name, a name that's hard to spell, or one who writes under a pen name. As with subjects, the catalog will let you know what the standard form of the name is. If you want to make sure you find everything we own on a certain topic or by a certain author, this is the best way to do it. So why does this work, and why is it better than keyword searching? As I mentioned before, keyword searches are based on the words used in the item. That means that these searches will often retrieve resources that aren't really about the topic you're researching, and they may not retrieve resources that are completely relevant, just because those resources use a slightly different phrase from your search query. But because in our records we use controlled vocabularies with standard terms, every item on a certain topic should be labeled with exactly the same term, and one term is never used to refer to more than one concept. This means that if you know how to find the vocabulary used in our records, which you do now, you can use these terms to create searches that will pull up everything you need and nothing else. Of course, most library catalog records contain one more piece of metadata we haven't even talked about yet: call numbers. You're probably used to using call numbers to search for specific items on the shelves. That's not the only use they have, however. If all we were doing was assigning items a specific place, we could put them in order by height or group them by color. Some libraries do this, at least organizing books by height. This is a picture from Indiana University's Auxiliary Library Facility, or ALF for short. It is essentially a warehouse for books, used to house books that there isn't room for in the main library. In order to maximize shelf space, books in the ALF are organized by height. That makes sense for the ALF, where the main concern is preserving as many books as possible, and people aren't allowed to go look at the shelves and get their own books. They have to request books through the catalog, and staff members retrieve them. This sort of system is common in Europe, but most American libraries prefer to keep their collections open to the public, encouraging people to browse the shelves to see what items are available. Because of this, it makes more sense to organize our items by general subject. The advantage of this system is that if you know the classification system, you can browse the shelves in a subject that interests you, and chances are good you'll run into a book or topic that you want to look at. This is a great way to brainstorm topics for a paper. Here at Copley, we use the Library of Congress classification system, like most academic libraries. Most call numbers you see will look something like this. They may seem a little intimidating, but the nice part is that if you just want to browse the collection, you generally don't have to worry about the whole thing. The part circled in red is what we call the class. This is the part of the call number that we assign based on the item's subject. The third line, which is based on the item's author or title, and the fourth line, which is the publication date of the item, are only included to avoid duplication. It would be really confusing if a lot of items shared a call number. But when you are looking for a call number area to browse, all you need to worry about is the part before the decimal point, since that is the part used to group items by subject. This is a general outline of how the Library of Congress classification system is organized. You can see that it begins with broad topics, but as you go further into the outline, the system gets more complex, and the topics get more specific. Fortunately, you don't have to have the system memorized to take advantage of it. Let's go back to our Civil War example. Let's say you are writing a paper for a course that's about the Civil War, but you need a more specific topic for your paper and don't have any ideas. One thing you could do is go back to our search using the standard term for the Civil War and look at the call numbers. Do you see a pattern? Most of them seem to be around E450 to 600. If you go to that section of the library and browse the shelves, maybe you'll find a topic that interests you enough to write about, or just discover a book that you would never have found otherwise. You never know what you'll find in a library's collection if you just pick a section to browse. Most of the tools and techniques I've talked about today aren't new. They've been around since card catalogs and have been adapted for use in computer catalogs. One popular area of research right now, however, could lead to a completely new way of organizing and finding information. This concept is called linked data. The idea is that if we create enough links between different sets of metadata, computers will be able to make connections like humans do. What you see here is a visualization of the current state of linked data. Each circle represents a data set, and the lines represent links between them. In the ideal future, every data set will be linked. To make this a bit clearer, let's talk about a simple example: metadata about a website. You could simply include the name of the author in your metadata. If you did that, it would be easy for a future user to find out the name of the creator of the website. But if, instead of simply putting the name of the author in the metadata field, you put a link to a separate set of metadata about the author, then computers could follow that link, allowing future users to retrieve not only the name of the author, but also whatever other information you included in the author's record. This opens up boundless possibilities. Here is a more complex example to demonstrate how linked data could be useful. Let's say you wanted to do research on women in science who attended colleges in the Midwest and were first-generation college students. Traditionally, a record for a person who meets these criteria might look like this: a simple set of data that describe Jane Smith. While this record gives us plenty of information about her, it does not tell us whether or not she meets our criteria. A human researcher would have to look for more information about Manchester College, John Smith, and Jacqueline Smith to find out if Jane Smith meets all of our criteria. Instead, you could have a record that looks like this. Notice that some of the fields have become links. A computer could follow those links to find more data about each entity: John Smith, Jacqueline Smith, Manchester College, and Indiana University. This diagram shows a simplified version of a linked data system. Each rectangle represents a person or another concept, labeled by its unique identifier. I use strings of numbers as identifiers, like a book's ISBN, but an identifier can be anything as long as it's unique. I added the labels in parentheses to make things more clear for us, but a computer would only need the identifier. Each rectangle is linked to other rectangles via the stated relationships. A computer could follow those links to find the data needed to determine whether or not Jane Smith meets our criteria. For example, to determine whether or not she attended a college in the Midwest, it would follow the Attended College link to Manchester College, follow the Is Located link to the city, North Manchester, followed by the state, and finally the region, to confirm that Jane did indeed attend college in the Midwest. With enough linked data fields, a computer could generate a list of people who meet our set of criteria with a single search query. Eventually, we could get rid of traditional records altogether, using computers to provide the information we request by following the links between different data points. Of course, this can get infinitely complex as we add more links and levels, but it is essentially just teaching computers to make connections the way humans do. The advantage to this system is that computers can process information much more efficiently than we can, so if we can teach them to make these sorts of links, we could save a lot of time and effort. Another benefit is that linked data could be applied to mitigate one of the weaknesses of keyword searching we talked about earlier. Using our Civil War example again, if American Civil War were linked to other phrases used for it, such as the War Between the States, the War of Secession, the War of Rebellion, and common misspellings, it wouldn't matter which term you used. A query using one of those phrases could pull up resources that use any of the others. Library catalogs can already do this to a limited extent, but if all data were linked, any search engine would be able to take advantage of this ability. Unfortunately, ambiguity would still be a problem here. If you simply search for Civil War, you would get thousands of irrelevant results, unless the search engine had some way to disambiguate terms, like Wikipedia does by asking the user. Obviously, we are not there yet. We are steadily progressing, improving metadata standards to move toward a world in which all data is linked like this, but it will be a long time before we get there. Until then, our best option is to learn to take full advantage of the tools we have right now.